Los Angeles, summer of 1985. The heat was oppressive, the kind that made the city shimmer and hum, like a fever dream. At night, the air didn't cool. It clung to everything, heavy and strange. The people of the city began locking their doors earlier, pulling their curtains tighter, checking twice, sometimes 3 times, before turning out the lights. Because something had changed in LA. Something was moving through the night. It began as whispers on the radio, stories about a man who entered homes while people slept. Nobody knew how. He didn't break glass or force locks. He just appeared. The police said there was no pattern. He didn't target wealth or beauty, didn't stick to one neighborhood. East Los Angeles, Monterey Park, Arcadia, all struck without warning. A single word began to spread between neighbors, the Night Stalker. At first, no one believed such a person could exist. But when the first photographs of terrified witnesses appeared in the newspapers, when the first police press conferences stammered through words like unrelated but similar incidents, the disbelief began to rot into dread. By July, the fear was everywhere. Hardware stores ran out of locks. People nailed windows shut, even on the top floors of their apartments. Sleep was no longer rest, it was a gamble. Children whispered stories to each other. He comes through mirrors. He hides in your closet until you fall asleep. He can see in the dark. And though adults dismissed the stories as childish fear, they too found themselves turning on every light before bed, whispering prayers into the darkness. In an old house on East Whittier Boulevard, a woman named Sophia lay awake. She had heard the rumors, but she told herself it was all hysteria. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. She turned on the radio to drown the silence. The DJ's voice spoke softly about the heat wave and the rising tension across the city. And then, a scratching sound from the kitchen. Too deliberate to be a rat. Too faint to be a person. Her heart began to race. She rose quietly, her hands trembling as she reached for the light switch. The bulb flickered, then burned out. She froze. For a moment, she thought she saw movement by the window. Just a silhouette, tall, thin, unmoving. Her breath caught. She blinked. The shadow was gone. She didn't sleep that night. When morning came, she told her neighbor. The neighbor only nodded slowly and said, "Count your blessings. Some people don't see him, until it's too late." Detective Frank Salerno stared at the new case file on his desk. Another break-in. Another terrified survivor. No clear evidence. No fingerprints. The killer seemed to float through the city like a ghost, never seen, only felt. The victims had nothing in common. The neighborhoods were miles apart. The randomness was what made it horrifying, a reminder that anyone could be next. By late July 1985, Los Angeles was no longer just afraid, it was paralyzed. People whispered his name in grocery stores, in gas stations, in the pews of churches. That Night Stalker had become more than a man. He was a myth stitched together by news anchors and frightened neighbors. Detective Frank Salerno knew better. Myths didn't leave footprints. Myths didn't leave terrified survivors. But this one, whoever he was, moved like smoke. Every crime scene was the same, doors locked from the inside, no sign of forced entry. Sometimes he left footprints, sometimes symbols drawn in strange, ritual-like patterns. Always different, yet unmistakably connected. Salerno looked down at the most recent photos, blurry, grainy, but the same shape. A man, tall, gaunt, dark eyes, black hair, watching from the shadows of a street corner. Every photo had him half-turned, as if he knew exactly when the camera would click. In the small suburb of Monterey Park, residents started to patrol their neighborhoods. Men carried baseball bats. Women double-bolted their doors. Churches held nightly vigils. Radio DJs joked nervously about curfews, but behind the humor, there was real panic. In one interview, an elderly woman said quietly, "I don't sleep anymore. I sit by the window and watch. I don't know what I'm waiting for, maybe for him to come." The police worked around the clock, but each morning brought new headlines. New victims. It was as if the killer could hear the city's pulse, always one step ahead of it. Sophia, the woman who had seen the silhouette, still couldn't shake her fear. She'd installed 2 new locks and nailed her bedroom window shut. But nightmares haunted her. In every dream, she saw those eyes again, hollow, watching, waiting. Elsewhere, across town, another survivor sat in a hospital bed, trembling as she described the man. His eyes, they were black. Like he wasn't there. He smiled like he enjoyed watching me be scared. The police artist's hand shook slightly as he drew. When the sketch was done, the detective stared at it in silence. He didn't look like a monster, he looked ordinary. That was what made it worse. At night, he walked the streets barefoot. He liked the feel of the asphalt under his feet, the hum of electricity in the city. He moved through neighborhoods like a shadow, silent and patient. Sometimes he'd stop beneath a street lamp, watching a house for hours, waiting for the right moment. He loved the stillness before he struck, when even the dogs seemed to hold their breath. The newspapers called him the Night Stalker. He liked the sound of it. But in his mind, he was something more, a messenger of chaos, a reflection of the darkness people refused to see in themselves. He whispered to himself as he walked, his voice drowned by the hum of the freeway. "Fear is truth," he said. "And I am the truth they've forgotten." Detective Salerno's desk was a storm of paper. The LAPD was under pressure, the mayor wanted results, the public wanted a face. But there were no patterns, no motives, nothing to connect the crimes except the same silent cruelty. Then, one night, a patrol officer made a discovery, a partial shoe print left in dust under a windowsill. Salerno examined it carefully. The tread was distinctive, obvious sneakers, men's size 11.5. Rare. Imported. It wasn't much, but it was something. He ordered every department to log anyone caught wearing that shoe. It was the first real thread they'd had. And somewhere, out in the dark, the man in the shadows kept walking, unaware that the trail was beginning to close around him. August 1985. Los Angeles was melting beneath a heatwave that refused to break. The air carried the smell of asphalt and sweat, but underneath it lay something else, fear. Television anchors no longer smiled through the news. Every broadcast opened with the same words. Another attack linked to the Night Stalker. People began to sleep in groups, families camped in living rooms, doors barricaded with furniture. Hardware stores couldn't keep locks in stock. Gun shops ran out of ammunition. No one trusted the dark anymore. Detective Frank Salerno hadn't gone home in 3 days. The entire task force was living on black coffee and adrenaline. Every report that came in started to sound the same, every face in the photos blurred into one long nightmare. And yet, there was a pattern emerging, faint but real. The footprints. The same shoe. The same strange symbols drawn near windows and doorframes. The killer was moving faster, like he could feel the city closing in. Neighborhood watch groups patrolled with flashlights and bats. Police cruisers rolled through suburbs that once slept peacefully. In one televised interview, a woman said, trembling, "We don't go out at night. My kids sleep under the bed. We keep the TV on so the house sounds alive." The reporters called it hysteria. But the fear was real. One night, a man on the outskirts of East LA heard footsteps outside his house. When he opened the blinds, he saw a figure standing at the end of the driveway, tall, thin, his face hidden in shadow. He shouted. The figure didn't move. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the stranger lifted his hand and waved. By the time police arrived, there was nothing left, just a single shoe print in the dirt. Salerno and his partner, Gil Carrillo, studied the case map pinned to the wall. Dots covered nearly every part of the city. "This isn't random," Carrillo muttered. "He's following freeways." That realization hit Salerno like a jolt. Each attack was within a few miles of a major highway, perfect for escape. It meant their killer wasn't confined. He could strike anywhere, then vanish into the night. They expanded their patrol zones. Still, every time they thought they were close, another crime surfaced miles away. The Night Stalker seemed to be everywhere, and nowhere. It was nearly 3 a.m. when a woman named Maria Hernandez pulled into her garage after a long shift. The air was heavy, silent. She closed the door, turned toward her apartment, and saw movement. A man stepped out of the shadows. For a second, the fluorescent light caught his face, pale skin, hollow cheeks, eyes so dark they looked bottomless. He raised a hand, something metallic glinting within it. Maria ducked, bolted for the door, slammed it behind her. Her shaking hands fumbled for the lock as she heard footsteps retreating into the night. She survived, the first true glimpse of the man behind the myth. Her description, later given to the police, would change everything. Forensic teams compared the shoe prints again, obvious sneakers, men's 11.5, still the only solid clue. Then came a break, a stolen car abandoned near a crime scene. Inside, a single fingerprint, partial but clear enough for a match once the suspect was found. Salerno ordered every officer to memorize Maria Hernandez's description. Tall, thin Hispanic male, mid-20s, long dark hair, decaying teeth, dark eyes, very dark eyes. The city held its breath. Flyers went up overnight. News stations broadcast a composite sketch drawn from Maria's memory. For the first time, the Night Stalker had a face. Across town, in a dingy motel room lit by the orange glow of neon, the man watched his own face appear on television. He smiled. The reporters called him a monster, a demon, the embodiment of evil. He liked the way they spoke of him, like he was untouchable. He turned up the volume, leaned back against the wall, and whispered. "They know my face now. Let's see how fast they can run." He laughed softly, a sound swallowed by the hum of the city outside. August 30th, 1985. The City of Angels was exhausted. For months, Los Angeles had lived under the shadow of a faceless monster. But now, that monster had a name, Richard Ramirez. Detective Frank Salerno's hands trembled slightly as he held the printed photograph. The face stared back, sharp cheekbones, sunken eyes, long tangled hair. Ordinary, almost forgettable, except for the eyes. Eyes that looked as if they saw straight through you. The photo came from a fingerprint match found in the abandoned car. It was their break, the one they had prayed for. The LAPD held a press conference that afternoon. The chief stepped forward, cameras flashing, and spoke clearly into the microphone. "We have identified the Night Stalker as Richard Ramirez. He is armed and extremely dangerous." And with that, the entire city turned into a net of watchful eyes. When the news broke, panic transformed into something else, anger. People who once hid behind locked doors now stood in the streets, scanning faces. Every gas station, every bus stop, every corner of Los Angeles buzzed with the same words. "If I see him, I'll call the police. If I see him, I won't let him get away." For the first time, the city that had lived in fear began to fight back. Richard Ramirez didn't know the city had seen his face yet. He stepped off a Greyhound bus in East LA, tired and sweating, ready to disappear into another quiet night. But something felt different. People were staring. Whispering. A woman at a newspaper stand gasped when she looked at him, then at the headline, "Night Stalker Identified." Her hand trembled as she pointed. "That's him." Ramirez froze. For the first time, the hunter felt the chill of being hunted. He bolted, sprinting through the streets, weaving through alleys, darting between parked cars. But the city that once slept through his terror was now wide awake. Shouts echoed down the block. "Stop him! That's the Night Stalker!" Neighbors poured out of their homes, construction workers, mothers, teenagers, all chasing the thin, wild-eyed man who had haunted their dreams for months. He ran faster, panting, panic rising in his throat. But every street he turned down, more people appeared. He grabbed a fence, tried to climb, a hand yanked him back. Another struck his shoulder. The crowd surrounded him, furious, shouting, grabbing, hitting. For once, Richard Ramirez, the man who thought he was untouchable, begged for mercy. "Please, the police," he gasped. He wanted them now, the very people he'd mocked and evaded. By the time officers arrived, the crowd had done what the city had been waiting to do. They'd caught the Night Stalker. The courtroom buzzed with the weight of history. Reporters filled every seat. Behind the glass, survivors and families of victims sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces pale but determined. When Ramirez entered, shackled and expressionless, a hush fell over the room. He smiled, that same hollow smile, and raised his hand to reveal a crude pentagram scrawled on his palm. "Hail Satan," he whispered. The room gasped. But this time, his theatrics didn't bring fear, only disgust. The myth had been stripped away. He was no longer the shadow in the night, just a man, mortal and broken, trapped by his own arrogance. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. 13 murders. Countless other crimes. Sentenced to death. Years later, Los Angeles still carried scars. People who lived through that summer said the air itself had changed, as if something dark had passed through and left a stain. Detective Salerno retired quietly, never forgetting the faces in those files. He once said in an interview, "You can't fight evil like that and come away untouched." But the city, it fought back. That's what mattered. In the end, Richard Ramirez faded into prison walls, his name remembered not for power, but for fear. And when the lights of Los Angeles flicker late at night, some still whisper that the city remembers him. The man who brought darkness to the city of angels. But the city, in the end, won.